Hey, everybody. I'm doing a podcast with Eric Douthit, who's an attorney for Church, Hittle and Antrim. And this is an interesting one. He does a lot of development work in Westfield, and we cross paths many times with our land sales and commercial clients, things like that. So I think this is a great one. It's very relevant, it's timely. I hope you enjoy. Be sure to subscribe to YouTube stuff and my podcast, and let me know what you think. Thanks.
Hi, Eric Douthit. How are you today?
I'm great, Curt Whitesell. How are you?
I'm doing excellent. Thank you. It is 1:25 on Wednesday. What are you normally doing at 1:25 on a weekday?
I'm returning emails.
Huh.
Every 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, I'm returning emails. That's all I do.
That's what you feel like you do all the time? Well,
right.
Then I won't feel so bad if you're late on an email because you probably have a lot of them.
I do. I tend to get lots of emails.
Do you?
That's the nature of today's world, yes.
So I appreciate you coming on the podcast. So this podcast is obviously about Westfield real estate, Westfield business, things like that. And since you are one of the area experts, um, I would appreciate your insight on that. So thank you for doing this. Real quick, just tell us about Eric. Where are you from? The quick, nickel tour of you up till you're an attorney.
Sure. So I grew up in Noblesville, Indiana. I graduated in the early 90s from Noblesville. Went to college, went to law school, and my wife and I moved to Westfield in 2003. We moved from Carmel when my son was getting ready to start elementary school. We thought that Westfield would be a good fit for us. So we've been residents of Westfield since 2003. So it's been a great experience for us. We've loved Westfield. It is certainly my hometown. It's no longer my adopted hometown. It's certainly my hometown.
So you work for Church, Hittle and Antrim today. You're a partner there. How did you get to that company? Is that where you started, or have you worked your way there?
No, yeah, I started with another law firm. It was called Hollingsworth and Meek when I joined. It was called Hollingsworth and Douthit actually when I left in 2003. I was from Noblesville, as I said earlier. Church, Hittle and Antrim has been around on the square here in Hamilton County since 1880. So as my practice started to evolve, and I'd been about 7 years in, I talked to my partner, David Hollingsworth, and we both sort of agreed that it would be appropriate for me to look for other opportunities where I could focus more on the business side of my practice instead of handyman, do it all kind of guy. And that worked out so well that all of the attorneys from Hollingsworth and Douthit, which then became Hollingsworth and Lutz, joined Church, Hittle and Antrim in 2005. So I was,
cool.
So we didn't burn any bridges. It was it worked well for me. It worked well for all of them. And I think it's been a success all the way around for everybody. It was in my own old place when I got here.
So when you first got out of law school and started working, what was you said you were kind of a handyman. What was your business at that time? What were you doing?
Yeah. So the first 7 years of my practice, I did everything. I did divorces and wills and small business work. I did jury trials. I had a case where a mailman got bit by a dog as my first jury trial. So I did it all on the civil side. I didn't do much criminal work, but I did it all on the civil side, and quickly figured out that my personality was more adept for business owners than it was for families going through divorce or who needed any sort of real sympathetic emotion, since I have none of that at all. And quickly moved on to a practice that after 6 or 7 years where I was able to practice more on the real estate and corporate side and development side, and less on the litigation side.
So how do you start building your real estate business? What are some stepping stones? Because obviously I doubt, and maybe I'm wrong, that you got called day one to entitle 100 acres.
I did not. No. So when you're practicing in any service industry, no matter what the service industry is, I live by something called the rule of 50, which is also can be called, for me, it was probably the rule of 40, just because the nature of how Hamilton County has grown. And that was, if you go and sit in one place and you do that from the start of your practice until the time you hit 40, and you're a good corporate citizen, you're a good civic citizen, your goal is not to get rich off of one individual client, but to give good service at appropriate rate, then by the time you hit 40, your practice or your company will double every year in size. And that's what's happened with me. Is the first, the first 7 years I was in Central Indiana. We were living in Carmel at the time, but I did a lot of work in Hamilton County and in Indianapolis. And then as I joined here, I just had opportunities because of the breadth of what our firm does, and continued to be in the same place. And by the time I'd practiced for 15 or 20 years, I'd gone to enough events where I'd run into you that you eventually would start calling me. And that's what happens. So you show up, you do a good job. You don't try to be too obnoxious. Then by the time you've been around a while, people actually ask you a question about what you do. And if it's something you can help them with, usually it works out well. So then we took that and we built upon it by having specific strategic ideas as to where we wanted to grow. And we are lucky enough to be in Hamilton County. We're lucky enough to be the firm that's been around the longest in Hamilton County, and probably the largest firm in Hamilton County, certainly largest hometown firm based here.
For sure.
We've got a lot of connections, and as Hamilton County has evolved over the past 50 years, the folks that were farmers have turned into landowners who have turned into developers, and we've tried to be their clients all the way through the process.
Do you remember as you were coming up, do you remember, does a hard real estate project stand out? I know all of them have their own little quirks and they're just as hard today, but do you have any that you could share?
Sure. Well, 2008 was hard, right? So
a little bit.
that entire year or 2-year period was hard for a lot of our real estate clients. I've had a couple of entitlement projects that I found really disappointing that they didn't go through. One was a park that we were trying to put into Washington Township that didn't work out for a variety of reasons. One was a park we're trying to build in Noblesville for a variety of reasons. And I was disappointed because I thought those were good long-term projects for the county and for the citizens of Indiana that just didn't quite come to be. So those were things that I didn't love too much. But those are the toughest ones. Some of the bigger ones we've had have been some of the nice developments we've had in Westfield with regards to, after Grand Park went in, being able to utilize some of that commercial development and really get it ready to kick off. And it's grown exactly like we'd want it to grow. We were lucky between my partner, Matt Skelton, and I, we've been lucky enough to participate in a variety of projects that were out there that have been successful. So, and if you are asking why, or thinking, well, why aren't you naming them specifically? I'm always subject to something called attorney-client privilege. So some of these are public record. You can look them up if you want. Some of them are less public records. It's not up for me. It's up to my client to talk about them.
So as you've dealt with a ton of transactions, if you had to describe what your role in a transaction is, your main role, what you feel like you do the most, other than respond to emails and forward emails, what do you think your role is for the most part in a real estate transaction?
That's a really good question. So I think when you talk about a real estate attorney, there are really 3 different kinds of roles that an attorney can play in a transaction, right? So the first is in the transaction itself, helping to, whether it's the buyer or seller, maneuver themselves through that transaction. So as a seller, it's relatively simple. You're just helping the owner of the land get the documents they need to close, helping them understand what the purchase agreement looks like, what the timing of that looks like. As a buyer, you're helping them through a process that's called due diligence. And due diligence is essentially the research that the buyer is doing on the real estate to make sure that it meets its specific needs. So when we're on the first piece of the transaction, and that's all we're helping with. We're negotiating the contract for the buyer or seller. We're helping with due diligence, which includes doing environmental studies, title studies, surveys. You're doing some zoning components. Does this real estate meet my zoning needs? So that's one thing that a real estate attorney does. The second thing that a real estate attorney does is a real estate attorney helps finance that transaction and otherwise make sure it's set up for good long-term success. So this could be whether it's working with the bank to get the loan put together, whether it's helping raise private funds with the benefit of an individual, or even going through some of the government entitlement processes that may be out there with regards to TIF financing or some other kind of development financing. And then the third thing that a real estate attorney does on a regular basis is they get it the property entitled or zoned, and that's where you take a piece of property that the use under the city ordinance may be farming or maybe some other use, and you get it tailored to the specific use that your buyer wants to use. So I deal in each one of those three quadrants, try to add expertise to each of those. And then after the transaction's done, I like to, if I can, represent that individual company that now owns it and help them with their corporate work as well.
Does that typically happen? Would you say that for the most part?
It'll often happen, yeah. So if it's a local developer or somebody who's a local company, then I'll continue to represent them. We do have a lot of national developers who come into town that are just hiring us to help with the transaction or the entitlement, or maybe even the financing. So, but a good portion of folks continue to use this. And one thing, as I'm sure you know as well as anything else, life is a contact sport, and the contacts in your phone never decrease; they only increase. So people may call me once every 10 years to assist with a project, but when you get old like I am, you got enough people that are calling you once every 10 years. You can still be.
It works out.
It does work out. That's right.
So. All right. So you've done a lot in Westfield. You've been working in Westfield since the beginning of your career, and specifically development and that type of attorneying. I don't know if that's a word, but how has from the early years when there was no real development in Westfield, or like early 2000s, to today, how has being a entitlement or development attorney changed over those years in Westfield?
We're a lot busier now than we used to be. The nature of the developers and of what the city requirements are have gotten a lot more sophisticated as we've moved through it, and the general nature of the communication with the town has certainly evolved over the course of time. Things that were viewed negatively or viewed with suspicion 20 years ago are maybe viewed with less suspicion now, and some goals with regards to what they wanted development to look like 20 years ago has evolved into a different thing that the city would like to see now. So it's gotten a lot busier, a lot more sophisticated, and as always, the vision always changes within a city because life is a journey, it's not a destination. You're always changing your goals.
So over the years, when you call the city, now some people haven't changed. There's been some people that have been around for most of those years, or a lot of them. Is their conversation changing with you, not just because you're closer, but are they becoming almost colleagues to the point over the years?
Yeah, so they always have, right? So when I started practicing at Hittle and Antrim, one of my partners was actually the attorney for the then town of Westfield. So when we were at that point, we're the attorneys for the municipality. We're still the attorneys for the schools and the library. So after we were no longer representing the city, those people that used to be my clients or clients of the firm were still working at the city.
Yeah.
And they're also the people I live with, that I go to church with, that, I coach their kids and they coach mine.
Mm-hmm.
So they've always been, whether they're elected officials or whether they're city employees, they've always been colleagues all the way
Mm-hmm.
throughout the process. And the one thing that we have found is not every project is going to be a great project.
Mm-hmm.
Not everything is going to fit. And I think one of the roles that a good real estate attorney does for their client, especially on the entitlement side, is they say, this isn't the right place for you, or this isn't the right piece of ground to buy for you. Let's go find something that works. So we really try to view ourselves as gatekeepers, the first question for the city. So we're not bringing things to the city that we don't think meet what the city's vision is. And then, yeah, these people have become my friends and colleagues, and some of them I knew before they were elected. Some of them I knew before they were employed by the city. Many of them I get to know afterwards, but we see each other all the time. So hopefully they appreciate me as much as I appreciate them.
I'm sure they do. So
Yeah.
when you're so like myself, I would imagine, because you do have some focus regionally, does it oftentimes a user or a developer with a specific use come to you and say, hey, Westfield, where would you suggest we go?
Yep. So it comes in a variety of different ways. For example, Mayor Willis put on a couple of symposiums at the beginning of his administration, or at the end of his administration, about what he wanted industrial to look like in Westfield, what he wanted residential to look like, what he wanted commercial to look like. So we brought existing clients to that. They got to hear what his vision was, and then they went and looked for ground in Westfield that they thought would meet it. One of my partners, Matt Skelton, used to work with the city of Westfield in their land use and economic development thing. He helped write a lot of the ordinance that we work with, or certainly knows it very well. So when a user comes in and says, this is where I'd like to do, he'll have ideas of where it should go. Sometimes the city may not want that user in that particular place, and then we can meet with the city and come up with alternative places to go. Sometimes it's just a longtime client who owns 400 contiguous acres in Westfield and says, hey, we want to get this position in the right way so that we can attract those users to come in. So can you help us to get it entitled to do that? So, but each one of these, it's a collaborative process with the city, the real estate owner, the developer, and our job is to help facilitate the communication among those three folks so that they're each getting what they need out of each of those transactions.
So we are getting ready to, the city is getting ready to work on a new comprehensive plan after many years. How important is a comprehensive plan to someone like yourself? Or do you use those? Do your clients care what's on the comprehensive plan? Stuff like that.
Comprehensive plans are fantastic in a lot of ways. What they do is it causes the city and its citizens to really sit down seriously and think about what do they want to do, where, and why. So that's really helpful for us when developers are coming in with a specific use and they're looking for a region of where it goes. The counterpart to that is this isn't like Sim City, if you remember that game, where you can just pick and move things around super easily. Sometimes people want to sell, sometimes they don't. Sometimes there are users who want to put that hotel there, or they don't want to put it there. Sometimes you want an Arby's franchise, but the Arby's franchisor doesn't want to come into town. So the comprehensive plan does a great job of painting the outside of the lines of what we'd like to look like, give us goals of where we're going to go, and help us point specific users into specific locations. But it's going to evolve. The comprehensive plan, when it's completed, the next day becomes outdated because life has passed, and it gets more stale as you go along. But it's a really important thing to do and a really important thing to revisit. And I'm glad the city's doing it. I think it's going to end up being a great exercise for everybody.
So Westfield's grown a lot, which is one of the reasons why the comprehensive plan became so quickly outdated or has changed, and the world and users have changed. What other struggles do you think cities like Westfield have for clients like yours? Like I have things like regulation, standards, process, availability, things like that. What do you see are struggles that your clients are going to have with, and it's not just Westfield, all Hamilton County fast growing cities?
Yeah, so the perception becomes reality is probably the biggest struggle. People perceive, for example, State Road 32 west of 31 over to, let's say, Ditch or Spring Mill, they perceive that is bad traffic. It's got some stoplights, but it's 6 stoplights worth of bad traffic in a place where we're trying to put those particular uses. So ultimately, that you're going to create traffic issues whenever you're growing. It's how do you phrase those traffic issues in a way that the perception of traffic really isn't that bad. It's a 5-minute jog. Yeah, you got to stop a couple times. That's where it is. So there are other symptoms like that where people are going to perceive that something could have been done differently or could have perceived something could have done better. There's so many factors that go into development. Where's the water line, sewer line, traffic? What's the availability of real estate? All those things. That's one, I think, the toughest things that folks have is getting all those perceptions lined up so they line up with reality, because you got a whole bunch of different players, right? You've got city administration is trying to do one thing, city council is trying to do maybe something the same, but they've got their own vision for it, right? They're all individuals who've been elected. You've got the owner of the real estate, you've got the developer of the real estate, you've got the neighbors, you've got the citizens, you've got the schools. So getting all those folks aligned with regards to both the perception and the reality of project, that's the toughest thing that faces folks. People hear this use and they immediately go to what they perceive that's going to look like, when it's not always the case. So I think that's one of the things that attorneys can help do, is they can help phrase that so everybody understands the reality of each of those circumstances, so the perception becomes the reality. Hopefully that made sense to you, Curt, and wasn't a bunch of gobbledygook.
Hey, you touched on something, availability. Obviously, Westfield does not have much until Monday, industrial zoning, let alone any other pre-zoned property. Obviously, we have a shortage of inventory. Is that an opportunity, though, for clients like yours?
Yeah, it really is. Both, I think the city's realized and folks around town have realized that you have to have ready-made spots for people to move into, not just quote unquote shovel-ready sites, right? Certain folks, just like in the residential market, certain folks need a house and they need it right now. So you've got to have that house ready for them to move into. Some of them want to build a custom house. So having those properties zoned, hugely important to get to shovel ready, and then it'll allow folks to then build some speculative industrial, some speculative commercial, some speculative properties, which will drive even more positive growth here in Westfield. And that's the balance, is how do you get positive growth? And that kind of pre-zoning, that kind of spec building gives us opportunities that we don't have right now.
Do you think we would have so now North Point comes up, but I know they need bigger projects. Do you think smaller industrial sites, do you think spec build would begin more if we had sites like that available for spec developers?
Certainly. I mean, you look at entrepreneurs, most folks are like me and you, right? You own a business, you employ a few employees, but you want to stay close to home. Same thing happens with these folks who are selling all sorts of materials, who are doing all sorts of things. So to have that flex kind of office use, I think would create opportunities here in town. I think there's a lot of use for it. I think there's a lot of demand for it. And it's helpful on the tax rolls as well, as there's not a lot of infrastructure demands, not a lot of school demands, but they pay tax at a higher level. But it all comes down to balance, right?
Yeah.
You need to balance what your portfolio looks like, and the city needs to balance what their tax portfolio needs to look like.
When you would go into and sorry, I'm just kind of throwing questions at you here.
Okay.
When you were going in front of a council, and without ragging on the previous council, is your strategy different from council to council, or maybe even city to city, council to council, that kind of stuff? Do you use different strategies?
Yes and no. The first thing I'll tell you is this, and I honestly believe this, and I get some elected officials get frustrated with me because they don't believe me when I say this. Every single person that I've ever met in Hamilton County that's been elected, every single one has had the best interest of the city in mind when they've made every decision they've made, right? I've never met a single individual who was doing things for the wrong reason. Now, I may disagree with some of their decisions. I may disagree with some of their approaches, but I would never disagree with what they're trying to achieve. They're trying to achieve what they think is best for the city of Westfield. Now, naturally, if you're going to run for a city office, you've got some ego because you think you can help. And that's good, right? They've got confidence in what they're doing. And there are going to be times you disagree, but that doesn't mean we need to be disagreeable. So from a macro level, Curt, my strategy really doesn't change. One of the things that you learn early is how small the world is. So with every project we bring, we try to be as transparent as we can, as honest as we can. We try to listen, we try to talk, and we try to give them all of the facts that they want. I don't mind if somebody says, I don't want that here, right? So one of the Joe Edwards, who was a council member, both when we were a town and then as we became a city, Joe would be really good when I'd sit down with him and he'd say, I don't want this here. I'd say, what can I do? Is there anything I can change in the way it looks or in the way the exterior looks to make it work? He said, no, I don't want it here. I said, okay, well, that's really helpful to us, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes you say, if you build it like this, then it's not the use that bothers me, and we go from there. So our strategy, generally speaking, is to be open, honest, and thorough with each of the folks. Now, that stated, each one of the council members are human beings, and they have different things that they're more focused on and what they're looking for. Some folks are looking for what's the economic benefit. Some are looking for what does it look like. Some are looking for how does it fit into the use of the neighbors that are around them. So there are certain things you emphasize with different counselors because it's what their interest is. But ultimately, it's the same story for each of them, and we're telling that story numerous times over the course of time, and it'll evolve based on what they'd like to see happen, what the city'd like to see happen, and what's economically feasible. So yeah, you're going to talk to each one differently, but the general strategy is the same, and that is to present the project and why you think it's a beneficial project for that jurisdiction.
And I'm glad you said that everyone's intentions are in the right place. It's just everyone has a different opinion how to get there, and
that's exactly
I think
right.
That's true. I think that's some of the contention is, it's just politics basically.
Hey, people are going to disagree. They may have two different visions on. Some people may not want to see us grow as fast. It's okay to think that way. Some people may want to see us grow faster. It's okay to think that way too. That's why we've got more than one person that's been elected. We come up with a consensus, and then we try to fit things within that consensus the best we can.
So, how can a city like Westfield or in Hamilton County, how can a city like Westfield be prepared beyond the comprehensive plan, be prepared or welcome the future development, commercial development world in your eyes, or make your clients just feel more welcome?
That's a very tricky question, right? Because each one of my clients is going to have a different experience based on what they're bringing forward and as they're going, as what they're trying to do. There is to make us feel welcome, or to make commercial developers feel welcome. It's really one of the things I tell elected officials all the time is it's much better to give me a fast no
Mhm.
than
Yeah.
anything else. Like if this isn't
Yeah.
the project you want, there are very few developers that Matt or I or any of our partners are bringing to town that will be offended if you say, no, we don't want this here.
Mhm.
Where you can
Good
get
point.
frustrated is if you lead them down a road and then you tell them no, right? And
Mhm.
things can change,
Yeah.
things alter and things modify. But if it's something that you know isn't within the vision, a quick no is actually the most welcoming thing you can do because they can move on to the next parcel. You may
Mhm.
say no, not here, or no,
Yep.
not anywhere, or no, not now. If we
Mhm.
have those three pieces of information, it's great. And I'll tell you, the city does a really good job and always has done a good job. From when we're a town with a town manager, last
Mhm.
administration, this administration, meeting with us.
Yeah.
If we would sit down with any council member, I've never had consistent council members that weren't willing to meet with us. I've never had anybody in the city that wasn't willing to give us some time and bounce some ideas off of the developer and give us good ideas. So I think they are generally welcoming, but a quick no is the best thing that we can ask for from a developer because they don't have to pay my
Interesting.
outrageous hourly fees very long if that's the case.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
This is like about the wrap up here, and I really appreciate you being thorough on stuff because it's interesting.
No.
If you could do the same lawyering job all day long,
Mhm.
project type, someone calls you all day to do this task, is there something you could pick that you would do?
So the trite answer we always give is name changes because that's the easiest thing to do in the law. But my
That's
favorite
funny.
thing to do is to sit down with people, think through their question,
Uh-huh.
and really come up with solutions for it. So whether it's going to lunch or dinner or meeting with them and coming up with it,
Mhm.
doing that without actually having to read anything or write anything, that would be the perfect job because it's
Mhm.
it's the reading or the writing that is it takes the longest, and that's where you can start to get into some trouble with the other side sometimes. But
Mhm.
the best part is coming up with those solutions with folks, meeting them one on one, whether it be on a Zoom meeting like this or whether it be in person, and really thinking through and giving them unique perspectives on what they can do, what they can't do, and helping them just sort of solve their problems. And
Interesting.
that's the best part about my gig, no
Yeah.
question about it. We get to solve a lot of problems.
What are you looking forward to in the next couple of years?
So we have our youngest is a senior in high school. So we're getting ready to be empty nesters. So from a personal standpoint, I'm interested to see what that's going to look like over the course of my personal life and also how that will impact my career a little bit as well. It'll give
Yeah.
me a lot more flexibility in my practices we're moving forward. I'm really excited about what the Westfield downtown is turning into.
Yeah.
We live not in Bridgewater, but near Bridgewater, and we're excited in 5 years or so to see all the different opportunities to ride our bikes up there
Mhm.
and go to dinner and what that's going to look like from a real estate use here in town. That's going to be just super cool. I'm
Yeah.
really excited about the Pacers winning the NBA championship this year and for 40 consecutive years thereafter. I'm excited about that.
It's gonna be a
Um,
fun
it's,
40 years.
it's going to be a fun 40-year run that we're putting together.
Uh-huh.
On a professional level, I'm excited about the firm. When I joined, I think I was the 10th attorney. We're up to 60 attorneys now, and our
Unbelievable.
practice is expanded beyond Hamilton County in a
Mhm.
lot of ways, and that's exciting to see how these younger attorneys grow the thing over the course of time and take this
Mhm.
opportunity that the senior guys gave to me. Hopefully, we're able to give to them. So I got nothing but really good things to think about going forward. I got really lucky where I was born. I got really lucky about where I happen to practice law. I can honestly
Mhm.
say it's the best county in the country, and
Gotta be.
you get anything you want. Now we don't have 1,000 Ethiopian restaurants, but the one we've got in Indianapolis is really good, right? We don't
Right?
have every sports team, but they're really fun.
Uh-huh.
It's a great quality of life. It's a pretty good way to to raise a family. Our school opportunities, both private and public, are great. I mean, it's the greatest county in the world. I'm really happy to be here and participate in some way.
Well, thank you for doing this podcast, Eric. You are one of the good ones, the respected guys locally, and you could probably do a whole hour podcast on the ways you volunteer and committees you're on, which is awesome.
Well,
A lot of people don't have that.
When you want me to give that TED talk, let me know. I'm happy to do it. Okay.
Well, thank you again for being candid and helping out and all that stuff.
No problem. Talk to you later. Thank you.
Be sure to subscribe, like, and follow.